Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and yesterday on the Facebook fan page someone asked me a question and I answered it, and I didn't quite give them the answer they expected, and a couple of people said they would love for me to do a video just talking about this for a little bit because it's an interesting topic and it very much fits within the subject matter of a fitness channel or an athletic channel. So I want to expound upon that a little bit. Now the question that he asked me, and I'll read it out to you guys, was: I'd love to see a video breaking down which takes more time, building strength or anaerobic/aerobic endurance. And I think what a lot of people don't realize is that anaerobic endurance, or things like basically sprint strength, things like that, how fast you can sprint, is more a function of actual strength. Your strength training will carry over directly to that and immediately. How much you can squat for a max will of course carry over to your 40-yard time or even your 100-meter time in a sprint, in a very real, very measurable way, whereas in strength does carry over to endurance, but not to the same degree. But what I want to talk about is the way humans are built. A lot of people don't realize this, but we as a species, we gain endurance. So say we go from an untrained state, and by the way, an untrained state is not natural or normal for our species. This is only a recent occurrence because we live in a world to where we are no longer either hunter-gatherers or even agriculturists. Most of us do not do hard manual labor all day, every day, whether it's out running and hunting and gathering or foraging. We don't live in the wild, and we still don't even live in a world where we basically farm or run a farm our entire life to survive. We don't live in that world anymore, so our untrained state is actually not normal for our species. But when we go from an untrained state to a trained state, we gain endurance at a much, much faster pace than we will gain strength. And I'll use myself as an example. When I first started training, as a lot of you know, I was overweight, I was obese, but I actually did a lot of work on my family ranch. So I was actually decently strong compared to the average person. Actually, I'll put it bluntly, I was a lot stronger than the average person. I walked in the first time I ever did a barbell squat in a gym. I did 2 plates aside, so 225 pounds my first day squatting. So I didn't start out weak, but I was over 100 pounds overweight. I started running and I went from 270 pounds fat to 170 pounds in 1 year's time, and I could run 10 miles straight. And I got to a point where I was running 10 miles a couple different days every single week at that point. So from a completely untrained state where I could not even run 100 yards without falling down on the ground and having to lay there for 5 to 10 minutes, while losing 100 pounds of body weight, I built up in a year's time to be able to run 10 miles nonstop. And I ran a minimum of 5 miles every single morning before I even had breakfast. And some days I did 10 miles fasted in the morning. I took up weight training after this, and even after having done physical labor and starting out fairly strong, it still took me, without any drugs, it still took me 3 full years after doing the distance running and other manual labor and stuff to get a 300-pound bench press. Now you compare that to the animal world, and a 300-pound bench press for a 190-pound man is pathetically weak. Humans build endurance very, very fast, but we build strength at a very slow rate. We are pound for pound. Some of our top athletes are weaker pound for pound than a lot of animals are. And I mean our elite level athletes with the best genetics who are on drugs and have been training for 5 or 10 years straight, in a strength match would still get owned by a lot, if not most animals. And for example, if any of you were to take up training and you were to start training seriously and say you used anabolic steroids for the next 5 years straight, so you're not even natural anymore, whereas the animal is, and you strength train for 5 years, while on these steroids for powerlifting, a female chimpanzee, if you were to put her, an untrained female chimpanzee with female chimpanzee hormone levels on no drugs and no weightlifting experience, would beat you on the bench press and the deadlift. In fact, it might not even be pound for pound. She might be able to beat you not just on your Wilks score, but actually on the lifts themselves. Now, they're not built to squat because they would just sit down. It would be such a 6-inch range of motion, so we wouldn't count the squat. But things like the deadlift and the bench press, a female chimpanzee untrained would crush you as a steroid-using powerlifter. She would beat you hands down. They're stronger than us. Your dog, you'll notice that when your 50 or 60 pound dog gets really excited and you have it on a chain and a leash, of how hard it is for you to restrain that animal, even if it weighs a half or a third of what you do, even if you work out, that dog can give you a pretty good pull, and you actually have to really work hard to control an animal a third of your body weight, even if you work out. So what does that tell you about your pound for pound strength? It's pathetic. But we find in the wild, and we know historically, that humans are amazing at endurance once we're in decent shape. And we know that there are tribes in Africa that do this, and there were tribes in the Native Americans that do this, that do endurance hunting, which means they run down wild game on foot over a day or two. Because humans can sustain endurance longer than a horse or a deer or an antelope if given enough hours. They'll beat us in the short term because they're stronger than us. They have better anaerobic capacity. They can sprint faster. They can outrun you in a mile flat out. They'll beat you 3 times over, even if you're a sprinter. But what about 20 miles? What about 30 miles? What about 50 miles? What you find is that a human who's in shape, in good shape, and most of our ancestors had to be, can actually outrun most of those big plains animals given a long enough distance. We will beat them in the long term. We can run them down, particularly when we worked in tribes. So we do know that endurance hunting was done. Now, Jamie Lewis or someone would argue with you that it's terrible and it's inefficient and it didn't really work, and that's a whole nother argument. But we do know that it was practiced by a lot of different cultures around the world, and some still practice it today, endurance hunting. And we know that we foraged for very, very long distances, for days at a time, long distances, and then came back and brought back different lightweight supplies to families. We are an endurance species, and it has to do with our leverages. The way our limbs are built, the way our musculature is built, we suck at strength. We have to work really, really, really hard to get strong. It's very easy for us to build endurance compared to, say, other mammals. But the question was, how much time? And that's the interesting part, is that while it takes more time in terms of days, weeks, months, years to get stronger, in terms of the amount of training time that we have to dedicate to it, it's actually much, much less. Because you will find that for most people, you can get about as big and as strong as humanly possible for you, near maximum rates, in 3 to 4 hours of training a week. Some people less, some people need more. But you can get a pretty effectively close to the limits of what you can do with 3 to 4 hours of work a week. Whereas if you only did 4 hours of endurance a week, you're not going to get anywhere. I have days where I do 3 to 4 hours of cardio in a single day and then do it again the next day right now. And my endurance isn't that fantastic. So even for me, I spend easily 5, if not more times as much time per week working on my endurance than I do my actual strength training, even though I'm a power lifter, but I want to be in better cardiovascular shape and have more endurance. So the answer is different depending on which way you ask the question. So if it's a total amount of time it takes over the years or the months to get there, you will gain endurance at a far, far faster pace. But if it's the amount of hours you have to dedicate, then endurance is going to take a lot more hours of involvement to make good progress on even a weekly or a monthly basis than your strength training will. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it has been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time. But let me give you guys a bicep shot before I go. Oh.